There are nights in baseball that don't belong to the statistics. The box score captures what happened. The radar gun captures how hard the ball was thrown. The exit velocity data captures the force behind the contact. But none of it, not a single number produced by any of the systems installed in every modern ballpark, captures what happened between three people on that field when everything finally clicked at the same moment. Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. The Dodgers' ultimate trio. They have been spoken about together since before a single pitch was thrown in this era of this franchise. The combination of those three names in the same lineup, on the same team, competing toward the same goal, was supposed to be something historic from the very beginning. The talent was never in question. The individual capability was never the conversation. The question was always whether they would find each other. Whether the moment would arrive when all three of them were operating at their highest levels simultaneously, feeding something into each other that none of them could produce alone. That moment arrived. And when it did, two grown men who have seen everything this sport has to offer sat in front of cameras and let their emotions show in a way that professional athletes almost never allow in public. Betts was emotional. Freeman was emotional. And the reason both of them gave, independently, without coordination, without rehearsal, was the same. Shohei didn't give up on us. To understand what that sentence means, you have to understand what the months before it looked like. This season has not been a straight line for the Dodgers. No championship run ever is, regardless of how the outside world perceives a roster that carries this much individual talent. The distance between talent and performance is one of the most honest gaps in professional sports. You cannot will a batting average higher through reputation. You cannot purchase an on-base percentage with a contract number. The game demands that you produce, every day, against pitchers who have studied everything about you and designed their approach specifically to take away what you do best. Betts went through a stretch that tested him. Not publicly dramatic. Not the kind of slump that generates daily headlines and crisis coverage. But real. The kind of difficult period that a player feels in his hands before anyone else sees it in the numbers. The timing slightly off. The pitches that used to be mistakes suddenly becoming outs. The creeping uncertainty that visits even the best players when the game tightens its grip. Freeman carried something heavier. What Freeman carried this season goes beyond baseball. His son's health situation brought an entire city to a standstill during the World Series, and the weight of that experience does not disappear when spring training begins and the calendar moves forward. It lives inside a person. It reshapes how they experience everything, including the game they have played their entire life. Freeman came back this season carrying something that statistics were never designed to measure. And Ohtani watched all of it. This is the part of the story that the numbers cannot tell. Ohtani arrived in Los Angeles as the most anticipated free agent signing in the history of professional baseball. The contract. The talent. The two-way capability that has no comparable precedent in the modern game. All of it created an expectation that would have been suffocating for almost any other person who has ever played this sport. He handled it the way he handles everything. By showing up. By preparing. By competing with the specific, quiet intensity of someone who decided long ago that the only response to pressure is performance. But what his teammates saw, what Betts and Freeman saw specifically, in the daily accumulation of a long season, was something beyond performance. They saw someone who never pulled back. When Betts was struggling, Ohtani was present. Not with speeches. Not with motivational language assembled for the moment and delivered with theatrical sincerity. Present in the way that competitors are present for each other, through the small, consistent gestures that accumulate into trust over the course of months. The extra work in the cage. The conversation that lasted longer than it needed to. The look across the dugout that said, without words, I see what you're carrying and I am not going anywhere. When Freeman was managing everything that came with his son's situation, Ohtani did not treat him differently. He did not offer him the careful, distant sensitivity that people sometimes mistake for respect. He treated Freeman like the competitor Freeman has always been. He expected things from him. He competed alongside him. He refused to lower the standard, because lowering the standard would have been the most disrespectful thing he could have done. Freeman understood that. Eventually, he said so out loud. The game itself arrived the way the best games do, without announcing itself as significant until it was already inside you. The Dodgers needed this one. Not in the desperate, everything falling apart sense. In the quiet, professional sense that serious teams understand when they look at the standings and the schedule simultaneously and calculate what a particular game means for the shape of the weeks ahead. Ohtani was locked in from the first inning. The stuff was sharp. The command was precise. And in the batter's box, before he returned to the mound, he had already done damage, the kind of early damage that shifts the psychological weight of a game before most of the crowd has finished finding their seats. But the image that will last, the image that traveled across time zones and translated into languages and generated the international reaction that followed, was not Ohtani alone. It was the three of them together. Betts made a play in the field that reminded everyone in that stadium why his name belongs in any conversation about the best to ever play his position. Not a flashy play. A necessary one. The kind of play that only happens when a player is fully present, fully committed, operating without hesitation. When the moment demanded everything, Betts gave it without pause. Freeman at the plate was something different again. There are moments when a player transcends their slump, transcends the difficulty they've been carrying, and simply becomes who they fundamentally are at their best. Freeman had that moment. The swing was clean. The contact was certain. And when the ball left the bat, there was a sound in that stadium that goes beyond appreciation for a well-executed hit. It was recognition. The city recognizing that something real was happening between these three men on this field on this night. The press conference afterward was not a standard post-game formality. Betts sat in front of the microphone and took a moment before he began. Not for effect. Because he was genuinely sorting through something that had arrived unexpectedly and hit harder than he had prepared for. A reporter asked him simply, "What does tonight mean to you, given everything this stretch of the season has demanded?" Betts looked down for a moment. Then back up. He exhaled slowly. You go through difficult stretches in this game and you find out who is really with you. Not who says the right things. Who actually stays. Who actually shows up the next day and the day after that and doesn't change how they treat you based on what the numbers say you're doing. Shohei didn't give up on us. Through everything. He never changed. He never pulled back. He just kept showing up and kept expecting us to be who we are. That matters more than I can explain in this room tonight. The room was quiet after that. Freeman was next. His voice was lower. Steadier in the way that voices become steady after they've passed through something genuinely difficult and arrived somewhere solid on the other side. He didn't set up the answer with context or history. He went directly to the truth. There were days this season when baseball felt very small compared to everything else happening in my life. And Shohei understood that without me having to explain it. He gave me space when I needed space. He gave me competition when I needed competition. He knew the difference. That's not something you teach someone. That's who a person is. He stopped for a moment. Then. Shohei didn't give up on us. That's the only way I know how to say it. Two men. Same sentence. No coordination. No shared script. Just the same truth, arrived at independently, spoken out loud for the first time. The international reaction moved the way only Ohtani-related news moves. In Japan, the combination of those three names produced the specific kind of coverage that happens when Ohtani does something that connects his two identities, the player who belongs to baseball globally and the person who belongs to Japan specifically. The analysis went beyond the game itself. It went into what the dynamic between Ohtani and his teammates reveals about him as a person, as a competitor, as someone navigating the specific pressure of being simultaneously the most scrutinized and the most admired player in the sport. The word that appeared most frequently across Japanese sports media was not about his statistics. It was about his character. About the kind of teammate he chose to be when the people around him were struggling. In South Korea, the presence of Kim's name in the broader Dodgers conversation gave the story an additional dimension. Fans who had followed Kim's journey tracked the ripple effects of the roster decisions on the human relationships inside that clubhouse. The way the trio's public emotional moment resonated in Seoul suggested that what Betts and Freeman said out loud connected to something universal, the experience of being supported by someone who didn't have to support you, who chose to. In the Dominican Republic, Freeman's performance generated the specific pride that Latin baseball communities carry for their players when those players deliver in moments of genuine pressure. The swing. The timing. The decision to be fully present in a game that asked everything. That image traveled. And across all of it, across every language and every time zone and every platform where these reactions gathered and grew, the center of the story was always the same. Not the result. Not the standings implication. Not the analytical projection of what this performance means for October. The bond. There are teams built from transactions. Names assembled through negotiation and contract structure and competitive necessity. They win games. Some of them win championships. The talent is real and the results are real and the hardware at the end is real. And then there are teams built from something that front offices cannot engineer and contracts cannot guarantee. What Betts said. What Freeman said. What they both arrived at independently after a game that finally showed all three of them at their best simultaneously, that is not something that was planned. That is not something the Dodgers front office designed when they assembled this roster. That came from Ohtani choosing, every single day, through every difficult stretch and every demanding moment and every situation where pulling back would have been the easier option, choosing to stay. Choosing to show up. Choosing to refuse to give up on the people standing next to him. The trio is real now. Not as a concept. Not as a marketing narrative built around three famous names on the same roster. As something earned. As something proven through the long, unglamorous middle of a season that asked all three of them to be more than their statistics. Shohei didn't give up on us. That sentence will outlast this season. It will outlast the standings and the transactions and the press conference quotes that fill the space between now and October. Because it is not a baseball sentence. It is a human one. And that is exactly why the whole world heard it.